What do you regret? Wasting so much time before finding you. They came from two worlds that seemed destined never to meet. He, a white CEO at the helm of a billion-dollar corporation. She, a single black mother, working as a janitor, constantly looked down on because of her race and background. But prejudice couldn't stop love. And when Richard gave up his entire empire to choose Sarah, not because he had to, but because he wanted to, a story that moved the world to tears began. At 11:47 p.m., the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, pushing Richard into the hushed space of the top floor of the headquarters. The corridor was so silent, it felt like time had swallowed every sound. His polished leather shoes echoed against the marble floor as he made his way to his office to retrieve a few important documents. He had no idea that what he was about to witness would shatter his entire world. The cleaning crew had left long ago, or at least they were supposed to. The whole floor was dimly lit by emergency lights, and only the occasional hum from the security elevator broke the silence. But just a few steps from his office, Richard froze. There was a sound, software piercing, sobs, whispers layered over each other, desperate and heartbreaking. "Don't cry, Lily," a gentle voice said, the voice of a child. "Mom said we have to be strong." "My hands hurt, Rose. The bleach makes me sick." Those words sliced through the silence like knives through skin. Richard stood still, hand frozen on the doorknob, his ears trying to make sense of a sound that had no business existing here. It was the sound of children. He gently pushed open the door, his heart pounding like a war drum. The door creaked ajar to reveal a scene not even his worst nightmares could conjure. Two small black girls, thin and weary, kneeling on the floor of his vast office, scrubbing under the harsh fluorescent lights. They were no older than 9 or 10, their deep brown skin stark against the white tile floor, dressed in oversized, worn-out clothes clearly meant for adults. Their hands were raw and red from the chemicals, and their hair was pulled back tightly as if someone had told them looking clean enough might earn them mercy. It wasn't hard to understand why. Black children are always expected to be twice as clean, just to be treated half as human. One of them, Rose, as he would later learn, was trying to soothe her sister, but it was clear she herself was on the brink of collapse. Between tears and cleaning solution, the two girls kept scrubbing the floor as if their entire future depended on each stroke. "Who are you?" Richard asked, his voice louder than intended. The girls jumped like they'd been electrocuted, eyes wide, terrified. That special kind of fear only black children know when caught by a powerful white man in a building they were never supposed to be in. They instinctively shrank back, as if Richard might pull a gun at any moment. Lily, the younger twin, stammered, "Please don't call the police. We're just cleaning, sir. Mama says this is how we survive in this world, even if the world doesn't want us to be seen." "Mama's really sick," Rose added, trying to stay composed. "But she said if she missed a shift, they'd say black folks just want handouts and don't work. So, we came. I know how to mop, I swear." His briefcase dropped to the floor with a loud thud, a jarring sound that broke the trance. A white CEO in a suit worth thousands stood frozen before two black children scrubbing floors like ghosts in the night. No one was ever meant to see this, not in modern America, but it was real. "Where is your mother?" Richard asked, his voice lowered but still shaken. "She's been throwing up all day," Lily whispered. "But she said the boss doesn't like lazy colored folks. She said if she missed a shift, someone else, someone whiter would take her place. So, we came instead." Her voice trembled, but there was a strange resolve in it. "She taught us the process real good. We know what we're doing." "My mother's name is Sarah Chin," Rose replied, lifting her chin with a fragile trace of pride. "She said you were one of the few people in this building who ever thanked a janitor." A faint smile flickered across her face. Richard remembered the little thank you notes he used to write, but now thank you no longer felt like it was enough. He had never met Sarah in person, only knew that the office was always impeccably clean, but now seeing her black children cleaning the floors in her place near midnight, that surface-level respect turned into a deep, painful shame. The truth was, if Sarah had been white, would he have let this happen? "You girls shouldn't be here alone," Richard said, trying to keep his voice calm. "This job isn't meant for children. and certainly not at this hour. But Mama needs the money, Lily whispered. She cries every night, thinking we're asleep. Her medicine's too expensive, and rent's due next week. She looked up, her eyes red. They always say black folks do nothing but complain. Mama works twice as hard, so no one can say that about her. Richard felt a crack in his pride. He had been poor too, but never forced to prove his worth just because of his skin color. Looking at Rose and Lily, he saw a glimpse of his own mother, except she had never had to teach him to hold a mop at midnight because taking a sick day meant losing her job. "How did you get in here?" "Mama gave us her key card," Rose replied as if it were the most normal thing. "She taught me everything, which chemical goes on which desk, which ones not to use near plugs. I know the steps, every trash bin. She said, if you're black, you're not allowed to make mistakes." A black mother forced to train her children to clean offices because she knew that skipping one night meant no one would stand up for her. Her daughters worked until their hands cracked, while Richard, the man running a billion-dollar company, had never once asked, who really scrubs the floors beneath his feet? "Have you had dinner?" he asked. Two small heads shook. "Mama left soup," Rose murmured. "I think it's still warm." "It's almost midnight," Richard said quietly. "What time do you usually finish?" "Around 2, Lily answered. "Then we walk to the bus stop. If we're lucky, we sleep for 3 hours before school." She smiled, the saddest smile he had ever seen. Richard clenched his fists. Two black girls just 9 years old, working 6-hour night shifts and still attending school as if it were normal. He couldn't even imagine it. If they were the daughters of a white employee, would anyone have left them to fend for themselves like this? "No wonder Lily cried," he whispered. "Take a seat," he said gently, motioning to the 2 leather chairs across from his desk. The girls froze, eyes filled with fear, as if expecting to be scolded or thrown out. "I swear we didn't break anything," Rose blurted, trembling. "We cleaned real good, just like Mama taught us." Her voice carried that specific kind of fear only black children understand, when you're always assumed guilty. "It's okay," Richard reassured them. "I just want to talk." He walked over to the small fridge, took out 2 bottles of apple juice and a bag of cookies, his usual midnight snacks. For the first time, his conscience was harder to swallow than any food. "Here, take these. Eat while we talk." The girls accepted them silently, hands chapped and sun-darkened, trembling as they opened the wrappers. They ate like they were used to hunger, a poverty hidden in the shadows of modern America. Richard watched in silence, his heart heavy. He used to take pride in offering equal opportunities, but the truth was, he had looked away while the very system that enriched him crushed these children. And in that moment, he decided it had to change. "Call your mother," he said. "I want to speak to her." "Mama doesn't have a phone," Rose replied quietly. "Service got cut last month. She had to choose between paying for it or buying cough medicine." "Then we'll go see her." "But we still have 6 more offices," Lily protested, as if her mother's existence depended on spotless floors. "Cleaning can wait," Richard said, grabbing his coat. "But your mom needs to know you're safe, and I need to make sure she's okay." For the first time in a long while, he did something not driven by profit. As the 3 of them walked toward the elevator, Rose tugged gently at Richard's sleeve. "Mister, are you going to fire Mama?" Her eyes trembled, a question soaked in the deep fear black children carry, afraid of losing everything just for not being strong enough. "No, sweetheart," Richard replied, kneeling to her eye level. "I'm going to help her, I promise." But as the elevator slid silently down to the parking garage, Richard had no idea that this night would alter the entire trajectory of his life, from a lonely titan at the top to a man who had finally rediscovered the value of compassion, courage, and forgotten justice. His gleaming Bentley looked out of place in the neighborhood, where the children of the black working class grew up fearing the police more than dreaming of who they could become. Flickering streetlights, graffiti-covered walls, and a silence not born from darkness, but from being ignored. From the back seat, Rose and Lily whispered directions, their cheeks pressed to the cold window glass, searching for a sense of belonging in a world that had always told them they didn't. "Turn left. Our place is in the green building," The one with the broken sign, Rose directed. No map needed, just the memory of a child raised among cracks and tarpaulin. Richard parked in front of the three-story apartment complex, a shadow of a past long gone. The peeling paint flaked like the old skin of a world left behind, a place where the American dream had never arrived in time. Though the area was poor and the outside world had turned its back, signs of hope remained. A few chipped flower pots on the windowsills, a small garden patch where children had sown seeds with their own hands. Colorful chalk drawings stamped onto the ground in defiance of a society that had long grown indifferent. Apartment 2B, Lily whispered, her hand gripping a shaky railing, like someone about to fall, yet still trying to stand tall. The hallway reeked of spicy food and cheap cleaning chemicals. A torn-up carpet was held together with duct tape, in effort to preserve some dignity amidst poverty. Rose knocked softly. A weak voice called from inside. "Is that you? You're home early today." A voice so fragile it seemed like a breeze might blow it away. "We brought someone with us," Rose called back. "Don't be scared, Mama. He's kind, not like the people you used to have to hide from." The door creaked open, and for the first time, Richard stood face to face with the woman the girls called Mother, Sarah Chin. Even in illness, she left him stunned, not because of beauty, but because of a rare, unshakable resilience. Her hair was a tangled mess, sweat soaking the back of a worn bathrobe. Her eyes were swollen and red, but still held a glimmer, the kind found in women who have fought too long and never been allowed to rest. But what left Richard speechless wasn't her appearance. It was the reflex, that almost instinctive move of a black mother who had learned to protect her children not just from poverty, but from the judgmental eyes of the world. Despite trembling, she immediately stepped in front of her daughters. "Who is this?" Her voice was hoarse, but her gaze was unwavering. The kind of gaze shaped by years of being silently asked, "Do you think you belong here?" "This is Mr. Richard," Lily said, stepping past her mother, as if fear momentarily melted in the presence of home. "He saw us cleaning his office." Sarah's face went pale, drenched in sweat, her body swaying like it would collapse with the lightest touch. Richard stepped forward, intending to steady her. But Sarah didn't retreat, didn't ask for help. Black women were used to standing without it. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know they shouldn't have been there. If anything was broken, I'll pay. Please don't call the police. They'll think I've been neglecting them." Her voice cracked. Richard suddenly understood. She wasn't afraid because she had done something wrong. She was afraid because of her skin color. "No one's calling anyone," Richard said, his voice softening. He gently guided her inside the cramped apartment, modest but spotless. "You need to rest. You're burning up. No one expects you to carry this alone." The apartment was tiny, the walls peeling, but everything was astonishingly tidy. Every corner was a testament to love. Scribbled crayon drawings taped across the refrigerator, library books neatly stacked on a worn wooden table. No gold, but there was light. "Girls, bring your mom some water," Richard said gently. Then he turned to Sarah, voice lowering. "When was the last time you saw a doctor?" Sarah let out a dry laugh, a smile that knew what it meant to be doubted, to be denied. "I don't have insurance. A doctor's visit? That's a luxury. It's just the flu. I'll be fine." But Richard could see she was shaking like a leaf. "You've got two 9-year-olds working the night shift to keep your job because you can't afford to take a sick day. You don't need a doctor to know this isn't the flu. This is exhaustion." "You don't understand," Sarah said, accepting the water from her daughter. "I have to do everything I can to keep my job. One mistake, one complaint, and they'll drop me for not fitting the company image. If Mr. Johnson finds out I let my girls take over my shift, he might fire me. Worse, he might call social services. When it's a white mother, they call it hardship. But for someone like me, it's called neglect. They'll take my girls away." Richard sat down on the couch, but Sarah instinctively leaned away, keeping a cautious distance, as if any closeness might become a threat. "I won't let that happen," Richard said, his tone earnest. "But I need to understand, how long has this been going on? How long have you been fighting this alone?" Sarah fell silent, her eyes watching her daughters coloring nearby. They giggled softly, the kind of quiet laughter that knows not to draw attention. Their father left when they were 3, she said quietly. Said 2 kids were too much. 2 mouths, 2 lives, and he didn't have the spine for either. Back then I was working as an office manager, good pay, insurance. But when Lily got really sick at 6, I had to quit to care for her in the hospital. After that, no one wanted to hire a single black mother who had left work for personal reasons. Richard asked gently, "What kind of surgery?" "Heart," Sarah replied curtly, but her eyes told of a nightmare far deeper than words could carry. Lily was born with a congenital defect that wasn't discovered until much later, along with endless hospital bills that left Sarah with nothing. She lost her home, her car, and even her job, all because she dared to put her child's life above company hours. A single black mother was always forced to choose sacrifice. "We've been living in this building for 2 years," Sarah said. "I work 3 jobs, morning office cleaning, weekend restaurant sweeping, and night shifts at the construction site, just trying to pay off the hospital debt. But debt never sleeps." Richard's chest tightened. 3 jobs, 1 woman, 3 shifts. "You scrub concrete at midnight, clean office toilets at sunrise, and wash dishes while others laugh over dinner. How are you still standing?" "The kids stay with Mrs. Rodriguez next door when I work, but she's old. One time my child had a fever, and white neighbors called the police just because they heard loud crying. What do you think they assumed when they saw 2 brown kids alone? When the girls begged to come with me to work, I thought, at least they'd learn hard work. I wasn't teaching them to be replacements. I was teaching them survival," Richard said quietly. "You're training them to become future laborers at 9 years old." Sarah panted slightly. "I'm teaching them to survive, not to dream. In our world, brown kids either grow up fast or get crushed before they have the chance." She coughed harshly, her small body trembling, but her eyes still burned with fire. Rose looked up, her face glowing amid the gloom. "Mom, show him Lily's drawings. Her hearts are beautiful." Lily spoke with the seriousness of a small adult. "I draw hearts because I had heart surgery. The doctor said mine was broken, but now it's okay." Richard swallowed hard. He knelt down, eyes falling on a page filled with colorful, misshapen hearts. Each imperfect in a different way, yet beautifully innocent. None were symmetrical, but all were real. "You really are an artist, Lily," Richard said gently. "Mama says drawing doesn't pay rent," Lily replied with a smile, unaware her words landed like stones. Richard glanced at Sarah, then back at Lily. "You know what? Some of the richest people in the world started with a pencil. Don't stop drawing." Sarah shifted slightly, her eyes searching the space between pride and fragile hope. "Mr. Richard," she said, locking eyes with him, "I know I crossed a line letting my girls come to work, but are you going to report me? I had no other way. I know it was wrong. I know," she choked out, "but I haven't missed a single day of work in 2 years. If I do, who would believe I'm not lazy? For someone like me, failure is assumed." "What I'm going to do," Richard said, rising to his feet and pulling out his phone, "is call my private doctor to come see you tonight. Then we'll talk about how to help you and the girls live, not just survive." "I can't afford that," Sarah said immediately, almost as a reflex. "You don't have to pay," Richard replied. Sarah tried to stand, swaying from the fever, but her eyes unwavering. "I have to pay. I'm not asking for charity. I don't want my daughters to think they're a burden. I work so my family doesn't go hungry, so we're not pulled apart by systems that were never built for people like us," Sarah said, her breath shallow. "I'm not begging. I'm just trying to survive." Richard looked around the cramped apartment, now illuminated by a different kind of light, the light of resilience. "You've kept my building spotless for 2 years. Never a complaint, even with high fevers or total exhaustion. You taught your children not because you had time to spare, but because there was no other choice. If anyone deserves help in this city, it's you." Sarah eyed him warily. "Why? You don't even know us. People like you don't care about people like us." Richard said nothing at first, the image of his mother flooding back. A black woman with a bent back from working 3 shifts, dismissed by everyone around her, just for the color of her skin. 25 years ago, I was a boy in broken sandals, watching my mother cough blood while scrubbing a supermarket floor, and no one ever asked if she was okay. I swore, if I ever got the chance, I wouldn't turn away from families abandoned like mine once was. Rose and Lily looked up, their wide eyes sensing something in the air. They didn't understand every word, but they knew this moment mattered. Sarah stared deep into Richard's eyes, not searching for pity, but only finding sincerity, and somehow that made her more uneasy than rejection. If you're going to help, it has to be something I can repay. I won't owe anyone, not even a kind-hearted billionaire, Sarah said, her voice firmer than her body could support. Richard smiled, the first genuine smile he'd had in months. I think we'll figure something out, something fair. As he dialed his doctor, Richard realized finding Sarah wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a reminder of the man he used to be. They didn't just need him, he needed them. To remember why he did what he did, to live with meaning again. Dr. Martinez, a Latino man in his 50s, arrived in under an hour. He'd been Richard's family doctor for years and had seen the darkest corners of immigrant communities. While Lily and Rose sat curled on the couch, Richard felt his heart pound harder than any million-dollar deal. This might have been the most important negotiation of his life. She has pneumonia, Martinez said. Not critical yet, but she needs antibiotics and full rest for at least 7 days. If she keeps working like this, it'll become life-threatening. From the bedroom, Sarah's weak voice called out, "I told you I'm fine." Martinez let out a soft laugh. And every patient says it's just the flu until they're admitted for respiratory failure. Her condition isn't simple anymore, Dr. Martinez said gravely. I've prescribed strong antibiotics and high-dose cough medicine. She needs real rest, not pretending to rest. Richard followed the doctor into the hallway, his heart heavier than in any business deal he had ever negotiated. What if she keeps working? He asked, his voice low. She could die, Richard. White people aren't the only ones allowed to take sick leave, but people like Sarah, they're pushed until they collapse. She's lucky you found the girls. A lot of black folks don't get second chances like this. When Richard returned, he found Sarah struggling to her feet, hands trembling as she pulled on a pair of ripped jeans. I won't let you do that. Richard blocked the door, his voice firm like a gavel. I have 2 more buildings tonight, and the restaurant shift at 6 a.m. I don't have a choice. You have 1 week of medical leave, doctor's orders. I'll handle your work, all of it. Sarah looked at him like he just offered to sell his soul to the devil. You're going to pick up a mop and cover my shift? A white billionaire scrubbing toilets for a black mother? Who do you think you are? I'll talk to your manager. You won't lose your job for getting sick once in your life. What about rent, medicine, food? You going to wave all that away with a magic wand? You live in your glass tower. We crawl underground. No one waves a hand and makes it all vanish. Richard sat down, fingers interlaced, trying to find the right words without triggering her defenses. I'd like to offer you a new job, not out of pity, because you deserve it. Doing what? Sarah asked, suspicion etched on her face. I need a household services manager, full-time, with insurance, and 3 times your current salary. Sarah went completely silent, so quiet Richard thought she'd passed out from exhaustion. Finally, she spoke, her voice dry. What's the catch? Conditions? None. Administrative work, scheduling, ordering supplies, oversight. No more kneeling to scrub floors. And there's a school nearby for the girls, just a few blocks from your home. Good education. No more being called poor black charity kids every day. Rose and Lily peeked through the doorway, their faces lit with a kind of hope Richard had never seen on them before. Mama, Rose whispered, does this mean you don't have to scrub floors anymore? And you won't get sick all the time? Lily added softly. Will you be okay now, Mama? Sarah looked at her daughters, then turned to Richard, the man who had upended everything she thought she knew about the world. Why are you doing this? For us? A poor black family? Tell me the truth. Richard stayed quiet. Even he wasn't sure he had an answer deep enough, only that he couldn't not do it. When he started building his empire, Richard always thought of himself as one of the good guys. creating jobs, boosting the economy. But now, standing before a woman gaunt from exhaustion and two brown-skinned children clinging to their mother, he saw the brutal truth. He had forgotten the people behind the numbers. He used to think money measured success. But women like Sarah, forced to work 3 jobs because no one would hire a single black mother, were the real measure. You and the girls reminded me that every job is a whole world of life, not just stock charts and performance graphs. You talk like I'm some special charity case, Sarah muttered, her eyes still guarded. Honestly, Richard said slowly, your new salary for the next 10 years would still be a fraction of what I spend on office coffee each month. But for you, it could change everything. And for me, he paused, almost startled by his own words. Helping you might be the first thing in years that makes me feel like a real human being after so long in the cold world of rich white men. The girls climbed onto the bed, Rose with worried eyes on one side, and Lily clutching her heart, drawing like a talisman. Mama, we get to rest now, right? Rose asked softly. Of course, my angel, Sarah whispered, then turned to Richard with eyes full of both gratitude and caution. I can't answer right away. This is a life-changing decision, she said. Take your time, but promise me one thing. Richard leaned against the bed frame, voice serious. No working again until the doctor clears you. That's non-negotiable. I don't know if I can promise that. I have responsibilities, and being black means I don't get to be weak. Then let me carry some of those responsibilities for now at least. I'll cover this month's rent and the medicine. Consider it an advance on your salary. No one's giving handouts here. Sarah turned her face away, but couldn't hide the red in her eyes. Why are you being so kind? Really? Richard looked at them. 3 people carrying the weight of adversity together. Sarah, resilient despite exhaustion. Rose, like a little adult in a child's body. And Lily, still clutching her paper heart with all the hope in the world. Something stirred in his chest, something he had lost long ago. Gentleness, faith, family. The kind of things wealthy white men like him often forget until forced to face the truth. Maybe it's just because I'm not pretending, and I forgot how much that matters. In the days that followed, the image of the mother and her 2 daughters stayed with Richard, slipping between meetings, dinners, even into his sleep. He changed his schedule to drop by with food, storybooks, and help the girls with their homework, something he wouldn't have imagined doing a year ago. He was surprised to discover Rose had already finished the entire children's section of the public library. A black 8-year-old girl with the mind of a teenager. Lily, quiet and meticulous, taught Richard, the cold-blooded businessman, how to draw hearts properly, and somehow his own heart began to beat again. As for Sarah, she wasn't like any woman Richard had ever met, neither in a boardroom nor in life. She was everything the white world feared and looked down upon in a black woman. Strong, self-possessed, grateful but never submissive. And for the first time in his life, Richard found that more beautiful than any designer gown. When Sarah smiled at her 2 daughters, Richard felt something crack open inside him, something that had long been frozen in the indifferent world of white men fueled by power and profit. I have my answer, Sarah said when Richard came by with dinner, a fancy Italian meal in a neatly folded brown paper bag, as if kindness could be packaged and delivered to a doorstep. I'll accept the offer, but not unconditionally. I won't sit and let someone save me. Richard set the bag down, hiding the sigh of relief he didn't realize he'd been holding in. Tell me, Richard said, voice calm. First, I want everything in writing. I've seen too many people like me exploited for trusting rich men's promises. Second, I want a 6-month probation. No obligations, no favors. If it doesn't work, you help me find something else. Not because I'm not good enough, but because I'm used to people looking for reasons to push me out because of my skin. Third, I'm keeping this apartment for 3 more months. I'm not teaching my daughters to give up all their exits for one pretty promise. Richard nodded. Agreed. Anything else? Sarah hesitated, then lifted her chin, her gaze steady. I need to know, she said slowly, that this is about work, not pity, guilt, or some fleeting feeling. Richard paused. His cheeks flushed warm. He hadn't expected her to be that direct, but she had every right. "You're a kind man, I see that," Sarah said. "But I'm a mother, and a black woman. I don't allow anyone, not even a billionaire, to shape my future based on vague emotions. I promise this is just a job offer, a real effort to give those girls a fair start in a world that rarely gives them anything fair." But even as he said it, Richard knew he was lying to himself. This had already gone beyond charity. Somewhere between the simple conversations and the children's laughter, this had become something else, an awakening. It started when Rose gently tugged his sleeve, whispering about the secret spot where she kept her favorite books, a treasure she shared with no one but him. Then Lily, placing her math worksheet on his knee, trusting, without question, that this white man wouldn't mock her for spelling errors. But what shook Richard most was the way Sarah looked at him, not as a CEO, not as a white man with power, but as if she saw the man he used to be before reputation stripped away his humanity. On his way back to his grand, cold mansion, Richard quietly realized maybe he wasn't their savior. Maybe they were saving him from the kind of loneliness money could never fix. They moved on a Saturday morning in November. The air was bitterly cold, but something quiet and warm pulsed beneath it. Richard sent a professional moving crew, but Sarah, true to herself, packed every box by hand, carefully arranging her daughter's notebooks as if their life couldn't be entrusted to anyone, not even someone with 9 zeros in his bank account. Richard saw her in the kitchen, calloused hands wrapping chipped china in worn-out newspaper. She moved like someone who had packed her entire life into boxes too small for the rich to ever notice. "You don't have to do that," he said softly, not wanting to offend something sacred. "I can buy you new dishware, brand new furniture. You don't need to keep these old things." "This was my grandmother's," she said, lifting a cracked teacup like a sacred relic. "We black folks don't throw away legacy just because it doesn't shine." Richard paused. He understood, deeply. He'd lived on his single mother's welfare checks. He knew when you have nothing, even the smallest thing is a whole story, a lifetime. "I'm sorry, I didn't think of that," he said quietly. Rose and Lily crouched in the bedroom, packing their few belongings, an entire world in faded cardboard boxes. He heard them arguing, "The brown bear was from your 6th birthday, but I sleep with the white bear every night," as if deciding which memory was allowed to come with them. Their entire childhood, their whole family, packed into 4 boxes, just 4, no more. "Are you scared?" Richard asked, eyes still on Sarah's hands taping a box. "I'm terrified. I've never left the South Side. I've never worked in a white man's house. What if I mess up? What if they look at me like I'm trash? What if my daughters get teased? What if someone says her skin is black like coal again, like the kids at the old school did? That school has an art program Lily will love, and the library there, it's like heaven for Rose. And you're the strongest person I've ever known. You worked 3 jobs, raised 2 beautiful girls, and stayed standing even when the whole world wanted you to fall." Sarah paused, her hands resting on the roll of packing tape. "How would you know? You've only seen me a few times. I know you raised 2 amazing children while cleaning bathrooms and manning kitchens, carrying your whole family through winter with calloused hands and a heart made of iron. You turned night shifts into practical classrooms, turned laundry rooms into tutoring sessions. I don't need more time to know you're extraordinary. You scrubbed the floors of rich white people cleaner than they keep their own, and no one ever thanked you." Richard stepped closer, eyes on her hands. Swollen, scraped, strong. "That's enough for me to trust you." Mrs. Rodriguez stood in the doorway, her eyes blurred with tears. She was one of the few people who had ever been kind to Sarah in that building. "I'm going to miss those girls," she whispered, hugging the 2 little ones, small and dark-skinned, in a world that had never been gentle to their color. "We'll come visit, we promise," Rose said, voice shaking with emotion. "And I'll write letters. Mama says I have to learn your soup recipe," Lily added, her eyes sparkling. "You teach us your whole recipe, then we'll cook it in our new kitchen, okay?" "Of course, my mijas. And remember, whenever you need me, I'll be here, just like before." As Richard watched the emotional farewell, he realized Sarah and her daughters weren't just leaving an apartment. They were leaving behind a whole world they had clung to, a rare community of color that had protected them from the judgmental glares of the outside. This wasn't just a move, it was a departure from the last place where their skin color hadn't been mocked. A departure from people who had scraped together spare change, shared meals, simply because they understood one another. "Sarah," Richard said, voice low, eyes uneasy. "Are you sure? If you want to stay, I can make arrangements. I don't want you to feel forced to leave the place you belong to." Sarah glanced at the apartment once more, her eyes resting on Lily's heart, drawing, still taped to the peeling wall. Her daughter stood at the door, whispering goodbye to their old home. "No," she said firmly, like slicing with a blade. "This is our only ticket out of debt and out from under the stairs that judge our skin. I won't let fear steal my daughter's future." The car drove through neighborhoods that grew whiter and neater with every mile, manicured lawns and suspicious eyes appearing at every red light. The girls pressed their faces to the windows like watching a science fiction movie. "This house is like a museum," Rose exclaimed, "and not one blade of grass is out of place." As the car turned onto the gravel path leading to Richard's estate, the three of them nearly stopped breathing. Sarah clutched her hands tightly as if trying to hold on to a reality that felt too foreign. Before them stood an estate out of a rich white man's magazine, 20 acres, rolling hills, blazing red maple trees in autumn, and a main house so large it would confuse anyone who had grown up in low-income housing. Winding stone walkways, a crystal-clear pond, trees straight out of fairy tales. And in the middle of it all, a family who had lived crammed into a 3-person apartment with 2 jobs and 1 thread of hope. The staff home was a charming private cottage, 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and a balcony overlooking the garden. It was large enough to make Sarah fear she was playing the wrong role in a play not written for people of her color. "Mama, are we really staying here?" Lily whispered, afraid even the question might make it disappear. "This place is bigger than our whole old block put together." Rose gasped wide-eyed. Sarah turned to Richard as they stepped into the hardwood-floored living room. "Richard, this is too much. We can share a room like we always have. We don't need this luxury. We just need a place to breathe without being called freeloaders." "No, you do need this," Richard said firmly, as if commanding fate. "Rose needs a reading corner to explore the world, not to hide from judgment. Lily needs a drawing desk, not her mother's back as a writing surface. And you," his voice softened, "you need one night of peaceful sleep without jolting awake to yelling or footsteps above your head." In the next few hours, Richard helped settle the family in and gave Sarah a tour of the main house, where $100,000 paintings hung beside windows like lifeless ornaments. Helen, the white-haired cook, came 3 times a week. James from Honduras handled the garden, and Patricia, an Asian woman, did the main house cleaning on Mondays and Fridays. Sarah nodded politely but immediately recognized the familiar look in Patricia's eyes. That careful suspicion. "Are you a friend or my replacement?" "And I'll be in charge of all of them?" Sarah asked, both skeptical and prepared. Richard nodded. "Exactly. You're the lead here." As they passed through the grand wood-paneled hallway of the main estate, Sarah asked practically, "So I'll coordinate, schedule, order supplies, and manage the budget for this whole property?" Richard smiled. "Think of it like running a small company. Only the clients demand perfection every minute, and sometimes they're not used to a person of color being in charge." When they entered the main library, soaring ceilings, dark wood shelves reaching all the way up, sunlight spilling through the windows, Sarah stopped. She was nearly breathless. "Rose is going to lose her mind when she sees this," she said, eyes locked on the wall of books. A heaven for a bright little girl once labeled weird for reading too much in the old neighborhood. "Both girls can use this library anytime," Richard said. "I want them to feel this place is theirs, even if their skin doesn't match the portraits in the Great Hall." That night in the cozy cottage, Richard sat down with Sarah and the girls for dinner. Not a fancy banquet, but a real meal. Simple, warm, filled with laughter. Lily had already discovered the professional art kit set up on the table, a surprise gift from Richard. She was sketching their new home, with tall chimneys and flowers blooming on the porch. Rose was mentally organizing her reading list, her heart beating so fast it was almost audible. "This library, it's like a dream," she whispered. "Uncle Richard," Rose asked, looking up, curiosity in her eyes. "Why do you live here alone with such a big house? What's it for?" Sarah gave her a warning glance. "Don't ask things like that, sweetie. It's rude." "It's okay," Richard chuckled, though his eyes dimmed slightly. "I thought if I had enough money and a big enough house, I'd be happy. But I was wrong. Big houses just make the loneliness echo louder." Lily propped her chin on her hand, thinking, "Maybe you should get a dog. Dogs don't care about skin color. If you love them, they love you back." Rose tilted her head. "Or get married, have kids. A family fills in the empty parts. Even the lonely ones." Sarah blushed, wiping her mouth with a napkin to hide her shy smile. "Keep eating, sweetheart." But Richard wasn't smiling out of embarrassment. He was thinking, because there was something profoundly true in those innocent words. He had always believed women came to him for his money, not for who he was. And it had been true, because for so long he hadn't been himself anymore. They cared about the Rolex on his wrist, not the calluses on his palms from his younger days as an electrician. But now, sitting with a family not bound by blood, but by heartbeat, he felt a strange peace. Skin color, past wounds, losses, they all seemed to be folded gently into the warmth of that simple dinner. "What about you, Sarah?" Richard asked softly. "Do you think you'll ever feel like you belong here?" Sarah looked around. The golden light, the empty picture frames waiting for memories, Lily's laughter, Rose's bright eyes. She nodded. "I think we'll grow to love this place," she answered, her voice trembling but full of conviction. "Thank you, Richard, for giving the three of us a chance to just be ourselves, without apologizing for our skin color or our circumstances." Across the humble breakfast table, their eyes met, and something in that moment slowed time. Something intangible yet real, like sunlight filtering through leaves. In Sarah's gaze, there was more than gratitude for the opportunity he'd given her family. There was a quiet understanding. And in Richard's, more than the kindness of a wealthy white man, there was genuine admiration and a growing connection. It was the seed of something real, not pity, not obligation, but a bond between two people from vastly different worlds, and it both thrilled and terrified him. That night, returning to his cold estate, with its silent stone floors and dim amber lighting, Richard realized he hadn't just changed Sarah's life. They were changing his, in a quiet, profound way, like autumn turning leaves gold without warning. The first month flew by. The estate no longer echoed only with clipped lawns and lonely footsteps. It now had sound and soul. Sarah quickly proved not only capable, but exceptional. She coordinated the staff with calm authority, and even James, the conservative, skeptical gardener, didn't dare underestimate the new black housekeeper. The girls blossomed. Rose was invited to the advanced reading program, something unheard of at her old school, where she was labeled too bookish to make friends. Lily impressed her art teacher so much that her work was nominated for a statewide competition. But it was the little moments, the laughter drifting from the kitchen, the rapid footsteps across the porch, that silently stitched Richard's life to theirs without him realizing. "Uncle Richard, cereal again?" Lily walked into his kitchen one early morning, arms folded as she stared at the bowl of corn puffs in his hand like he'd committed a crime. "It's quick," Richard smiled defensively. "I've got to make a Zoom call. Mama says breakfast is the most important meal of the day. She made eggs for you. Come eat with us." Lily tugged at his sleeve, and then it became a habit, unspoken but expected. Every morning, just as he reached for the coffee or his laptop, one of the girls would appear. Rose with logic, Lily with wide eyes, and he'd walk the misty path to a real breakfast. Sarah always pretended to wave him off. "You're busy, no need." But her eyes said otherwise, every time he pulled up a chair. One morning, as Sarah set down a plate of steaming pancakes, Richard joked, "You don't have to treat me like this every day. I'm just your employer." "The girls love having you here," Sarah replied, turning away from the stove. "And so do I. It feels good to cook for someone who savors every bite." Richard nodded, then asked, You really are a great cook. Who taught you? My grandmother, she said. She used to say cooking was how our people show love. Not in words, but in smells and sweet endings at the bottom of a spoon. Their quiet intimacy, the glances, the eggs, the casual chatter, built a rhythm neither wanted to break. A habit, a family. One still Saturday afternoon, Richard sat at the small kitchen table, listening as Rose enthusiastically recounted the new novel she found in the library. Sarah was nearby, prepping lunch. She still wore her apron, sleeves rolled up, a soft smile on her lips as she listened to her daughter speak to her white boss like he was just family. Evening, what used to be the stillest part of the day, became what Richard looked forward to most. At first, he said he stopped by to check on things. In truth, it was to feel warmth, the kind his grand estate never had. He helped Rose analyze poetry, clumsily, often not grasping the metaphors, and listened to Lily share how a white classmate mocked her drawing, saying it looked like it was made in the ghetto. Richard said nothing at the time, but that night, he brought her the newest paint set from the most prestigious art store in the city. One evening, as the moon hung low behind the trees, Sarah looked at him over her tea and whispered, "You don't have to come every night. This isn't your responsibility." They sat on the wooden steps of the porch, the golden sunset draping the fields in warm light. A peaceful scene, filled with words left unsaid. "I'm not here out of politeness. I come because it makes me happy," Richard said. "My mansion, it looks like something out of a magazine, but living in it alone is like sleeping in a museum, beautiful but empty." Sarah placed her cup down, her voice quiet. "So you never thought about having a real family?" Richard leaned back against the post. "I used to, but I was too focused on building the company, and when I had everything, I realized I'd forgotten how to be with someone. When you have money, everyone who comes into your life sees you as a walking platinum card, not a person." He chuckled bitterly. "Sometimes even my skin, it's an invitation for them. But you," he paused, locking eyes with Sarah, "you didn't come here for that." Sarah exhaled softly. "Loneliness is something people like me are used to. But knowing you feel it too, that's unexpected. But now, it seems like neither of us is alone anymore," he said quietly. Their eyes met in the fading light of day, and something in Sarah's expression made his heart skip. Not because of how she looked, but because in that moment he felt seen. "Mama, I can't find Charlotte's Web," Rose's voice echoed from inside. Sarah let out a soft laugh and stood up. "Duty calls." That feeling, fragile as morning mist, melted into the air. But it didn't vanish. It stayed. The following week, Richard began arriving at work later, leaving the office earlier, and showing up in meetings with something different about him. A kind of ease. He ditched the tie, moved from his 22nd floor corner office to a cozy downstairs room with a window facing the garden, where Sarah often left a shortbread cookie beside his favorite tea. Over lunch at a fancy Italian restaurant, Tom, his longtime business partner, squinted at Richard over a glass of wine. "You're different these days. It's like you got your soul back," Tom joked. "Weird." Richard shrugged. "Maybe for the first time in my life, I'm living honestly." "You laugh more. You don't work through the night anymore. Last week you even asked me what grade my daughter's in," Tom said. "Come on, tell me the truth. Are you dating someone?" Richard leaned back in his chair, scratching his head sheepishly before finally confessing. I hired a new house manager. She has twin daughters. And somehow having breakfast with them reminded me that life isn't just numbers and spreadsheets. It's been a long time since I felt real." Tom raised his martini like he'd just uncovered a major secret. "So that's it. She's pretty, huh? Don't tell me it's that Asian maid?" "It's not like that," Richard protested weakly, but Tom just laughed. Sure, strictly professional, I bet. And the way your eyes light up whenever you mention this employee, definitely just admiration for her immigrant work ethic, right?" Richard looked down at his wine glass, silent. He wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. He had fallen for Sarah Chin, a woman of color, a single mother, someone the world had taught him wasn't in his league. And that terrified him. That weekend, Lily developed a mild fever. Just a common cold, according to the doctor. But to Sarah, it brought back a storm of worry. At midnight, Richard passed by the cottage and saw the light still on in Lily's room. He stepped inside and found Sarah sitting quietly, one hand on Lily's forehead, the other holding a thermometer. Her eyes betrayed the weight of exhaustion. "She's okay," Sarah whispered, as if reassuring herself. "Probably just a cold, but I can't stop thinking of the worst. After everything you've been through." "I understand why you worry," Richard said, pulling up a chair beside the bed. He sat in silence, eyes soft. "Can you tell me what it was like? Back then?" Sarah looked at her daughter, then lowered her head. It took a long moment before she spoke. "It was the worst nightmare of my life. Lily was so little. She didn't understand why she couldn't run or go to the park like the other kids. She just kept asking, 'Mama, what did I do wrong?' The doctors said we were lucky to catch it early, but the heart surgery, it was still so risky. I sat in the waiting room for 3 days, holding an old ultrasound photo, whispering prayers, not sure if I was talking to God or just trying to calm myself." Richard leaned forward, his voice low. "Were you alone?" Sarah nodded. "Completely. Her father disappeared as soon as he heard. My parents died when I was in high school. Best friends? White girls don't stick around long for someone like me. It was just me and Rose. She was only 6 and had to learn how to sit in silence, waiting by her sister's hospital bed. She thought Lily might die, and I couldn't promise her that it wouldn't happen." Richard clenched his hands, heart heavy, part compassion, part shame. He used to think people like Sarah were just the help. Now he saw a mother, a warrior, a human being. "And the hospital bills?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Destroyed me. Insurance covered part of it. The months after were a battlefield. I paid for medicine, rent, school, with blood and tears. I chose to save my child, and if I had to choose again, I would. But it cost everything else, even the tiny bit of stability I had left." They sat in silence, watching Lily sleep peacefully, cheeks pink from a slight fever, breath steady. No words were spoken, yet so much was said. Richard lowered his head, imagining if he had been there then, holding Sarah's hand in the waiting room, saying something as simple as, "You're not alone." Would it have changed anything? Would it have made the pain more bearable? "Sarah," Richard said quietly, his voice low and certain, like a vow, "I want you to know, from now on you'll never have to face anything alone again. If either of your girls ever needs help, if you ever need anything, anytime, I'll be here." Sarah turned her face away, her voice trembling. "Richard, you shouldn't say things like that. You're my employer, not my person. You don't own me." She turned to face him, her eyes sharp as blades. "Don't mistake kindness for possession, just because I work for you." She glanced down at Lily's small, sleeping figure, her eyes glistening, fighting something far larger than feelings. In the dim light of the bedside lamp, Richard saw something in her eyes. Not just gratitude, but a longing long suppressed, and his heart stumbled. "You're not my family," she whispered like a sentence, though deep inside, part of her wished it wasn't true. "But what if I want to be?" Richard asked, like dropping a pebble into the vast canyon between them. The question hovered, between two people from two different worlds, a powerful white man with inherited wealth and a single black mother who once lived off school lunch programs. And between them, a bridge named What If. But before Sarah could answer, Lily stirred and murmured, "Mama," and the moment shattered like a bubble in the still light. Although neither of them said it, both knew. Something had crossed the line between employer and employee, something irreversible. The next morning, Lily woke up with rosy cheeks and eyes full of energy, as if the anxious night had never happened. While eating pancakes her mother had made, Lily waved excitedly at Richard. "Uncle Richard, I have a drawing I want to show you. I drew our family," she beamed. The drawing showed 4 stick figures standing in front of a red-roofed house, 2 big ones holding the hands of 2 smaller ones. "This is me, Rose, and Mama," She pointed one by one. And this is you, because you have breakfast with us every day. So now you're part of our family too. Richard felt his eyes sting as he looked at the drawing. In the pure eyes of a child, he wasn't a boss. He was part of something sacred, family. Can I keep this drawing? Richard asked, his voice noticeably deeper. Of course, Lily grinned. Mama, can we put it on the fridge? Lily turned to Sarah, who nodded, but her eyes never left Richard. Warm, deep, and perhaps in love. That afternoon, the main house was quiet. Richard stepped into his office where Sarah was recording household expenses. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow on her hair. Sarah looked up. Their eyes met. The room seemed to shrink into that gaze. No words were spoken, but much was felt. Sarah, about last night, Richard began, his voice low. Richard, she interrupted, voice slightly trembling. Don't make this complicated. It already is, Sarah. I can't stop thinking about you, about Rose, about Lily, and about how I used to see this house as just walls and a roof, until you. Sarah stood up, backing toward the bookshelf as if to maintain distance. You're my employer, Richard. That's where this should end. You don't understand, Richard, Sarah said, her voice tightening. My life, my children's lives, depend on you. The job, the place we live, everything. I don't have the privilege to dream or to blur boundaries like people with money, with light skin, with options. Richard stepped closer, his voice quiet but steady. But what if that boundary no longer exists? What if this isn't about boss and employee anymore, but about something real, about feelings? Sarah gave a bitter laugh. And what if that's just an illusion? What if you wake up one day and realize you were just playing happy home with a single mom of color, with no fortune, no pedigree? Who doesn't belong in your world? What happens when that real feeling embarrasses you? Then what happens to us, Richard, when you decide to return to the world you came from? Richard took another step closer. In Sarah's eyes, he saw clearly. The fear wasn't just about love, but about daring to believe in something never meant for her. Sarah, he said, gentle but resolute, I would never hurt you or the girls. You have to believe that. Even if society thinks you're unfit or unworthy, I'm not them. She lifted her chin, trying to steady her voice. You live in a world I only walk through with an apron on. A world where my skin color means I'm assumed to serve, not to be loved. You have the right to choose. I don't. Then let me open that world for you, Richard said. Let you walk in with your own name, not a job title. Let me give you choice and freedom. Sarah stepped back. I wasn't born to be a kept woman, Richard. I don't raise my daughters to believe happiness comes from the goodwill of a powerful man. I won't have them grow up thinking love means being indebted, giving up independence for validation. Sarah, that's not what I'm offering. I don't want you to give anything up. Then what are you offering, Richard? She looked him straight in the eye. A ticket into your world as long as I stay quiet and know my place? Richard swallowed hard. He knew what he was about to say would either tear down every wall or destroy everything. I'm offering you my heart, Sarah. No conditions, no contracts, forever. The room fell still. Only the dry ticking of the antique clock echoed in the heavy silence. Sarah stared at him, eyes wide and glistening, as if waiting for a miracle, but too afraid to believe it real. You can't say that, Richard, she whispered. You don't know how much it would hurt if it's not true. Why not if everything I said is true? He replied, almost pleading. Because, her voice cracked, because if you love me too, it scares you. And I've been scared my whole life. Richard hesitated no longer. He crossed the room like stepping across a battlefield and took her trembling hand. Then let's be scared together, he said, still holding her hand tight. Let's find out where this goes. And if it breaks, at least we dared to try. Sarah, I'd rather risk everything than spend the rest of my life wondering, what if I hadn't dared to love you? Sarah looked down at their joined hands, grasped as if he'd never let go. Then she looked up into his steadfast blue eyes. The girls love you, Sarah, and I love them too. I've never been drawn into a family picture before, until Lily made one. This is all crazy. The best things usually start with a little bit of crazy. Sarah said nothing. She didn't need to. She simply squeezed his hand tighter, and Richard knew the wall had fallen. "If we really do this," Sarah said, her voice calm but layered with unease, "we take it one step at a time. No promises, no unrealistic expectations. And most of all, we say nothing to the kids until we're sure." "And what if it doesn't work?" she asked. Richard only smiled, the kind of smile that once brought in hundreds of millions in investments. "Then it will work, simple as that." "How can you be so sure?" she asked, almost laughing at his naive stubbornness. He pulled her close, his eyes no longer those of a CEO, but of a man in love. "This is the first time in my life," he said, "that I'm not thinking about profit margins, market share, or quarterly reports. I'm thinking about breakfast with the kids, about laughter at the table, about bedtime stories, about growing old beside someone who sees me for who I am, not the name on a finance magazine or a bank account, but the real me." "So who is the real man, Richard?" "I don't fully know yet," Richard whispered, "but I know one thing for sure. He's better, more honest, when he's with you." Her smile made his heart feel like it was bursting. It was more than a big win. It was the feeling of a man who had finally found something money could never buy, a place to belong. The kiss under the late afternoon sun wasn't rushed, wasn't possessive. It was a whisper between two souls opening their doors to each other. In that moment, Richard knew, for the first time, he had truly come home. 3 weeks passed. One quiet evening, as Richard stared at the analytics on his screen, a soft knock came at the door. Sarah entered, holding 2 cups of coffee. But what caught Richard's attention was her gaze. There was something old and heavy in it, like she was about to unearth a long-buried grave. "The girls are asleep," she said softly, placing the mug down. "I need to talk about the past." Richard shut his laptop, folded his hands, and looked at her seriously. "I'm listening." "I've been thinking," she inhaled deeply, "that if we're really doing this, you need to know who I am, who I really am." She sat down, clutching the coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "You need to know who I was before I became a single mom, juggling bills and pitying stares." "Sarah, you don't have to tell me. I love the woman you are now." "No, Richard. If this is real, you need to hear everything. The good, the bad, and the kind of truth that might make you doubt yourself. My maiden name is Sarah Williams. I grew up in Manhattan, Upper East Side." Richard looked up, unable to hide his surprise. "Upper East Side." "My father was the director of an investment fund. My mother came from an old wine dynasty. Private schools, summers in the Hamptons, a trust fund before I even knew my times tables." Richard straightened up. "So what happened?" Sarah took a sip of coffee, then met his eyes. "I loved the wrong man. So wrong, I lost the entire world that once belonged to me." Tony Chin represented everything Sarah's parents despised. A man of color, blue-collar roots, no degree, but burning ambition, the kind her elite family never respected unless it came with an Ivy League diploma. He was building a construction company from scratch, working nearly 18-hour days, calloused hands, shirts soaked in sweat, to turn zero into something worth pride. But to Sarah's parents, he was just some laborer clinging to their daughter. Richard asked gently, "How did you two meet?" "He was remodeling the kitchen in my family's estate. The kitchen my mother never even entered unless guests were touring the house," Sarah scoffed. "I had just come back from college, drowning in global finance seminars. But then I saw this man, dirty hands, steady eyes, and for the first time, I saw something real in a world full of polished lies and pretty words." When her parents found out about their relationship, they didn't just get angry, they lost it. "You're dragging our bloodline towards some black construction worker?" That line cut into Sarah like a blade. They threatened to erase her from the family tree, and they did. "They said Tony only loved my money, not me, but I married him because he was the only one who saw me as a person, not as an investment." They kept their promise. Trust fund? Gone. Inheritance? None. Contact? Cut off entirely. They even called me a race trader behind my back. They said if I wanted to live like the working class, I'd better learn to starve. Want to immerse yourself in a life of black people? Fine, but don't come crawling back. She spoke calmly, but Richard could see a storm of pain swirling behind those deep brown eyes. Time might have passed, but the wound of being rejected by one's own blood never truly healed. Was Tony happy? Richard asked quietly. Sarah nodded. Very, at least at first. The construction business started landing big contracts, and I found out I was pregnant, with twins, who you now know as Rose and Lily. We bought a small house in Queens. Nothing fancy, nothing glamorous, but full of hope. I thought I had made it, escaped my family's shadow, and built something real. I had everything: a husband who loved me, 2 babies on the way, and the peace of knowing I didn't need a family name, fortune, or status anymore. Things changed when the girls were born. Tony started feeling trapped by the responsibility, the expenses, the pressure. Love turned into burden. When Rose and Lily turned 3, Tony's business started failing. He worked obsessively, came home late, drank more, and then he started to resent me. Not for anything I did, just because I was there, witnessing his fall. Why? Richard asked, though he already sensed the answer. Because I couldn't help. I had no career, no skills, just a privileged past that made me look useless. I was raised like a display item, polished, presented as a city lady, but when real life hit, I had nothing to fight back with but helplessness. Tony needed a wife who could fight beside him, but I was just a polished past now hollow. Richard wanted to speak, that she wasn't useless, that she was the strongest woman he'd ever known, but he stayed silent. Because he understood, some pain must be spoken by the one who bears it. What broke everything was the doctor's announcement. Lily had a serious heart condition and needed surgery. That news hung over their tiny kitchen in Queens like a suspended sentence. Tony stared blankly at the bill, eyes lifeless. "I can't cover this," he said, as if the little girl wasn't his own daughter. "I married you thinking you were a rich white girl with a fat trust fund. Turns out you just brought bankruptcy." He took out his anger on Sarah, calling her a joke of the upper class, saying marrying her was the biggest mistake. Because instead of being rescued, he felt dragged to the bottom of society. After saying that, he packed his things. No goodbyes to the kids. Just one sentence. "Figure it out. You're white. The world's probably gonna give you a hand." That night, no hugs, no last look. Just a torn canvas bag and an empty promise. "I'll send money when I can." I can't bear seeing her in pain and not being able to fix it. "Better I disappear," he said. But to Sarah, it was just an excuse to run. Sarah choked up. "He never sent a dime, not a single call. To him, we were dead." Richard's chest tightened, his fist clenched, trying to hold in the rage. "No one deserves to be abandoned like that. I'm sorry." Sarah sighed, her voice heavy. "He wasn't completely wrong. I was raised like fine china. Beautiful, expensive, but breakable. When I needed to be strong, I didn't know how. So I learned. I took floor cleaning jobs, dishwashing shifts, worked night nurse rotations. I learned to survive, to count every penny like it was my daughter's heartbeat. I became what society never expected me to be. A white woman who stepped out of privilege and lived like she had no one left to lean on." "You're incredible," and Richard said. Sarah smirked. "No, I was just desperate." "No, Sarah, you're strong, smart, and brave. You saved your daughter's life with nothing but your own hands. That's not desperation. That's heroism." Silence fell between them. Richard looked at her, as if trying to comprehend the years she had fought just to survive. "Can I ask you something?" Richard said softly. "Do you ever regret leaving the world of wealth? For love?" Sarah thought for a moment. "I regret trusting someone who didn't deserve it. A man more afraid of responsibility than of poverty. I regret not learning to be independent sooner, for blindly believing love was enough. But choosing love over money?" She looked him straight in the eyes. "Never." "Even after all this," Richard whispered. She nodded. "Money doesn't love you, Richard. It doesn't hold you when you're shaking. doesn't laugh at your bad jokes, and definitely doesn't stick hearts on your fridge door. But my children do, and now, so do I. Richard stood up, walking around the table as if closing the gap between two different worlds. Is it because I'm rich that you're afraid of me? Partly. I'm afraid you'll see me the way Tony did, a lost white woman clinging to a man's money. I'm afraid that if you get bored, you'll let go, and me and the girls will lose everything again. A home, stability, a place that shields us from being thrown out by society because of our skin or our past. Richard took her hand, gentle but firm. Sarah, look at me. I don't want you for your past, or your family name, or your skin color. I choose you, the woman fighting every day to live honestly. You owe me nothing, and I don't depend on you. Everything I have, my job, my reputation, I earned through sweat, not through some powerful last name. And if we're together, it's because of love, not pity, not survival. Your job, your daughter's stability, they don't hinge on what we are. You'll never have to choose between love and livelihood again. I swear, I will never use money or status to make you feel small. Sarah looked deep into his eyes, searching for cracks in his truth. You swear? I swear. And your parents? They were fools to give you up just because they couldn't accept their daughter loved a brown-skinned construction worker. But thanks to them, you're here, strong, radiant, and the most precious gift I've ever received. Don't put me on a pedestal, Sarah said, her tone softening. I was stupid too. I thought love was enough. I didn't understand how cruel the world is to a single mother, white or any color without power. Richard nodded gently. We've all been that blind kid in love. That's not a crime. Sometimes I wonder, if I had bowed down back then, married some banker from a blue blood family, maybe I'd be living in a penthouse now. But maybe I'd be comfortable, safe, but I'd never be as happy as when I see Rose frown while doing math, or Lily hold up a rainbow drawing for me to stick on the fridge. Nothing compares to mornings making pancakes for my girls, or the way you kneel down to tie Lily's shoelaces. All I want is to see you smile each night. All I want is for Rose and Lily to grow up knowing that a man once chose to stay. Sarah lowered her voice. Richard, there's one more thing. What is it? She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. I knew who you were before you became successful. His eyes locked on the screen. An old newspaper page, a faded article about scholarships for underprivileged students. And there, among the young faces, was him. 19 years old, a shy smile, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big. I wasn't spying, Sarah explained, but when you told me about your childhood, I felt I needed to understand, and I found it. You didn't just survive, you won. Sarah fell silent, but her eyes stayed on him, waiting, anxious, and perhaps hopeful. Richard, she said, eyes lighting up, we went to the same school, around the same time. Richard stared at the old article like it was a portal to another life. Memories, once blurry, began surfacing like light in the mist. I remember you, he said, the words escaping like breath. What? She nearly whispered. Not clearly, but in our macroeconomics class. There was this black girl who always sat in the front row, always dressed sharp, asking questions that made the entire class fall silent. She didn't study for grades. She studied to understand the world. Sarah smiled. That was me. And I remember you too, she continued. The only white guy sitting in the back row, never speaking unless called on, but clearly smarter than all the loud rich kids. Then why, when you saw me again, in your house, wearing a maid's uniform, why didn't you say anything? You mean, like I was some black billionaire woman, and you were the white housekeeper? You thought I wouldn't recognize you, that I'd moved on to another world. Even if I remembered, I wouldn't dare reconnect with a man who used to be a broke student and now manages mansions. Richard set his phone down and pulled her into his arms. You're still that same girl. Only now you're stronger, because you walked through hell and didn't fall apart. Isn't it strange, he asked, how 2 students, one black girl underestimated by society, one invisible white boy, now find each other again? I think it's fate, he said quietly. Maybe the world is giving us a second chance. Sarah nodded, her voice softening. Maybe this time, we won't miss each other. That evening, when Richard returned to his cold mansion, full of expensive paintings and antiques, but no laughter, he realized something. Knowing Sarah had failed once didn't make him love her less. It made him love her more. She had once gambled everything just to love someone and lost it all. But this time, Richard swore she wouldn't lose. Not as long as he stood beside her. December brought the first snowflakes to the estate, but warmth didn't come from the fireplace. It came from a small kitchen where 3 people built a family. Richard was no longer an outsider. He was the one helping Rose with vocabulary, the front row fan at Lily's art shows, the man sitting on the couch beside Sarah every evening with a bowl of popcorn. He became the nightlight, the warm laughter, the steady presence. He didn't just share his time, he shared his heart with them. One peaceful night, after the girls had gone to sleep and the living room lights dimmed, Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know what? I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "It feels like everything's finally in place. For the first time in my life, I'm not scared." Richard gently squeezed her shoulder, whispering, "I know. I used to think happiness meant earning another million, sitting at tables with men in suits who mocked others for their skin color. But this time, it feels different," Sarah murmured, like a breath after a storm. "How different?" Richard tilted his head as if her answer might change everything. "It feels like I'm really coming home every day," she said, eyes shining. "Not just to a roof, but to a place I belong." Sarah looked up at Richard, worry clouding her face. "The girls are starting to ask." "Ask what?" he asked gently. "Rose. She asked me if you're her stepdad. And Lily wonders if that means you'll stay with us for good, instead of just dropping by a few times a week." Richard's heart clenched. "What did you tell them?" "I told them adults sometimes need time to figure out their hearts, but that you are always part of this family, even without a title. So, what would you say to them?" Sarah hesitated. Then she whispered, "I'd tell them, I hope it's true. I hope you won't just be the good man who visits, but a real part of this mixed-race family. The husband, the father, the protector." "Sarah," Richard said hoarsely, "there's nothing I want more than to be your husband and the legal father of those little angels. I want to wake up next to you every morning, in that house full of crayon drawings, laughter, and sparkling brown eyes." But then Richard pulled back, sighing, "But I'm scared it's too fast. You've been hurt. I don't want to be another man who breaks you. You once loved someone who promised to take care of you, then abandoned you among hospital bills and 2 black children in a world full of prejudice. I don't want you to think this is a burden, or that I'm doing it out of pity or guilt or obligation." Sarah looked at him intently. "Then what if I said, I've never been more certain that no matter how many biases there are against a white man and a black woman raising 2 mixed kids, I still want to go forward?" Richard turned, his eyes wide. "You're saying..." "I'm saying, you love me, Richard. Not my bank account. Not the hair I used to straighten before every interview. Not the small house I bled to keep. I love the man who wakes up at 6 a.m. just to make pancakes for his daughter, who is now also my daughter. I love how you sit and listen to Rose read her endless poem like it's Shakespeare. Love how you frame every messy scribble Lily makes like it's a masterpiece. I love your patience, your kindness, the way you make me, a single black mother who was once abandoned, feel like I deserve to be loved. Sarah, that's not all. I love how you still remember the days when there was just 1 pack of noodles and 2 pairs of torn sandals. You never forgot where you came from, and that's why you're strong. I love that you don't just make money, you help others survive, especially those who look like you. And above all, I love how you love my daughters as if they were born from you, despite the color of their skin, despite blood." And as the final words came out, Richard felt a wave in his chest. Not pity, gratitude, because he had finally found home. "They are my children in every way that matters, In heart, in responsibility, and in love, Richard whispered, his voice trembling. Then, Sarah said, eyes locked on him, ask me. Ask me what I see in your eyes every time you look at me, the thing we both know but haven't said. Richard slowly stood up, pulling her to her feet with him. He looked deep into the eyes of the woman who had endured too much simply because of her skin color. Ask you what? Sarah squeezed his hand. The question you've always kept in your heart. I've waited so long for it, Richard. He placed a hand on her cheek. In those gentle brown eyes, he saw the future. A future no skin color could stop. Sarah Chin, he said, voice nearly breaking. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and the legal father of 2 little girls who taught me what real love means? Will you build a black-white family with me? Imperfect, but true? Sarah, tears falling, nodded softly. I say yes to everything you just said and everything we haven't said yet. That kiss shattered every barrier. In that moment, there was no prejudice, no history, only love. The dreams Richard once thought weren't for people like him were now alive in his arms. The next morning, in the sunlit kitchen, Rose and Lily immediately sensed something different. Like a warmth brighter than the ceiling light had filled the room. The 2 girls exchanged glances, the kind only children growing up with the same injustice and hope can understand. You 2 look different, Rose said, squinting like a tiny detective. Like you just won the lottery but aren't allowed to scream. Sarah smiled, placing her hand over Richard's. Mom and Dad have something to tell you. You're getting married, aren't you? Lily shouted, nearly leaping from her chair. They both looked stunned. How did you know? Lily rested her chin on her palm, serious. 'Cause Richard looks at Mom the way Prince Eric looks at the Little Mermaid. Sparkly eyes and goofy mouth. And Mom's smiling like when I gave her that paper flower on her birthday, Rose added. And her hand won't let go of his. Like it never will again. Like, he'll hold it forever, Lily said, full of hope. Richard laughed, overwhelmed. That's right, we're getting married. The girls squealed with joy, running around the table like mini fireworks. Their laughter echoed in the small kitchen that had once seen both tears and spilled milk. So does that mean you're gonna live with us now? No more going back to the big mansion? Lily asked, eyes sparkling. Sarah nodded. Yes, sweetie. From now on, we're a family. Not temporarily, but forever. Can I call you Dad? Rose asked shyly. Richard's voice broke. It would be the greatest honor of my life if you did. So, can we have a big fancy wedding then? Lily asked, eyes twinkling. And invite Mrs. Rodriguez too? She says Mom is Wonder Woman, Rose added proudly. Lily narrowed her eyes. So, can we get a dog now? Every family has a dog. Sarah burst out laughing. One step at a time, honey. But Richard had already made a mental note. Mrs. Rodriguez is definitely on the guest list, and then I think it's time we visit the shelter, he replied. That afternoon in the soft winter sunlight, they walked the trail around the grand estate, now feeling strangely foreign. They talked about their new home, not one with high ceilings, but one filled with the laughter of black children and pancakes with burnt edges. Standing in the cold marble foyer, Richard turned to her. I want this place to truly feel like a home, not just a giant white house where successful white men display their victories. If it were you, he asked, where would you start? Sarah chuckled softly, slightly embarrassed. Everything. Honestly, there's not a single corner in here that makes someone like me or 2 little brown girls feel like they belong. She paused. I don't mean to sound rude. It's just, no, be honest. I need to hear it. Not everyone has the courage to point that out. She glanced at the cream-colored walls, the high ceilings, and the glossy wooden floors. Beautiful, but empty. I love the man who wakes up at 6 a.m. just to make pancakes for his daughter, who's now my daughter too. I love the way you listen to Rose read her endless poem like it's Shakespeare, the way you frame every scribble Lily makes like it's a treasure. I love your patience, your kindness, the way you make me, a single black mother who was abandoned, feel worthy of being loved. Sarah, I'm not done. I love that you still remember the days when you only had a pack of noodles and two worn-out sandals. You haven't forgotten where you started, and that's what makes you strong. I love that you don't just make money. You help others survive, especially those who look like you. And most of all, I love the way you love my daughters like they were your own, regardless of skin color, regardless of blood. As the final words left his lips, Richard felt his heart swell, not out of pity, but gratitude, because he had finally found home. They're my children in every way that matters. In heart, in responsibility, and in love, Richard whispered, his voice trembling. Then, Sarah said, eyes fixed on his, ask me. Ask me what I've seen in your eyes every time you look at me. The thing we both know but haven't dared to say. Richard slowly stood up, then pulled her gently with him. He looked into the eyes of the woman who had endured so much, simply because of the color of her skin. Ask you what? Sarah gripped his hand tightly. The question you've kept buried. I've waited too long, Richard. He placed a hand on her cheek. In her gentle brown eyes, he saw the future. One no color could block. Sarah Chin, he said, his voice nearly breaking. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and the official father of two little girls who taught me what real love is? Will you help me build a black-white family that's imperfect but honest? Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she nodded. I say yes to everything you just said, and everything we haven't said yet. That kiss shattered every barrier. In that moment, there were no prejudices, no history, only true love. The dreams Richard once thought weren't meant for men like him, now lived and breathed in this embrace. The next morning, in their small sunlit kitchen, Rose and Lily immediately sensed something was different. Like a warmth deeper than the ceiling light had settled in the air. They exchanged looks, the kind only children growing up in the same injustice and shared hope could understand. You two look, different, Rose said, squinting like a little detective. Like you just won the lottery but aren't allowed to scream. Sarah smiled, placing her hand over Richard's. Your dad and I have something to tell you. You're getting married? Lily squealed, nearly leaping from her seat. They both looked at her stunned. How did you know? Lily rested her chin in her hand, dead serious. 'Cause Richard looks at Mom exactly like Prince Eric looks at Ariel, all sparkly-eyed and open-mouthed. And Mom's smiling like she did when I gave her that paper flower on her birthday, Rose added. And she's holding his hand like she's never letting go. Like, he'll hold it forever, Lily finished hopeful. Richard laughed, emotional. Yes, we're getting married. The girls shrieked with joy, running around the table like little fireworks. Laughter echoed through the small kitchen that had seen both spilled milk and silent tears. So that means you'll live with us now? Not in that big old mansion anymore? Lily asked, eyes wide. Sarah nodded. That's right, sweetheart. From now on, we're a family. Not temporary, but forever. Can I call you Dad? Rose mumbled. Richard's voice broke. It would be the greatest honor of my life if you did. So, can we have a big wedding party? Lily asked, eyes twinkling. Invite Mrs. Rodriguez, too. She says Mom is Wonder Woman, Rose chimed in, proudly. Lily narrowed her eyes. So, can we get a dog now? Every real family has a dog. Sarah laughed. One thing at a time, sweetie. But Richard had already mentally taken notes. Mrs. Rodriguez is absolutely getting an invite, and I think it's time we visited the rescue shelter, he said. That afternoon in the soft winter light, they walked the path around the mansion. Once grand, now strangely unfamiliar. They talked about their new home, not the one with high ceilings, but the one filled with laughter, burnt pancakes, and black children running free. Standing in the cold marble foyer, Richard turned to her and said, I want this place to truly be a home, not just a whitewashed palace where white people display their success. If it were up to you, he asked, where would you begin? Sarah chuckled softly, unsure. Everything. Honestly, there's no corner in here that makes someone like me, or two little brown girls, feel like they belong. Her voice dropped. I don't mean to be rude. It's just, no, be honest. I need to hear it. Not everyone's brave enough to say it out loud. She glanced at the cream-painted walls, towering ceilings, polished wood floors. Beautiful, but soulless. This place feels like a museum. No room for laughter, for tears, or even the screams of little girls being told their curls aren't pretty enough. Richard nodded. Then let's make it a place where your daughters can run barefoot without being scolded for smudging the floor. A place where you don't have to apologize for your skin not matching the curtains. Sarah looked at him, skeptical. You sure? Kids are messy, and rich white neighbors won't like it. Richard smiled. I've lived long enough in the fake quiet of the elite. Give me a home with laughter, bickering, even Lily's rap music blasting from her room. They spent hours touring the mansion, room by room, as Sarah plotted ways to rescue it from the expensive coldness imposed by white designers. A cozy reading nook with thick rugs for Rose, where no one would ever say, black girls reading look weird. A sunny art room upstairs for Lily, where skin color wouldn't be a barrier to creativity. A family room, she said, not for showcasing Italian sofas, but for curling up together, watching Disney, eating popcorn, and arguing over which black movie is the best. As the list grew, Sarah laughed. We're talking about a fortune here. Not expensive, Richard said. Worthy. Sarah, I have enough money to buy an island, but I never thought about using it to buy joy until I met you. Let me spend money for the first time to build happiness, not power. Sarah squeezed his hand. Our family, she emphasized, voice cracking. Those words have never meant more than they do now. That night, as they told the girls about turning the mansion into a place of music, art, and sometimes even tears, Richard realized this was real wealth. 6 months ago, he lived for growth, charts, and profit margins. Now wealth was measured in whispered bedtime stories, confessions about skin color bias at school, in crayon drawings taped to the fridge that read, New Dad. As they sat on the porch, watching the two brown girls run under the fading sun, Sarah turned to him, eyes moist. You know what the best part of all this is? That we'll get it right. You won't just be the rich man who loves a black woman. You'll be a father, not on paper, but in spirit. And I will have a husband who doesn't look at me with pity, but with respect. Richard tightened his grip. Our children, Sarah. She nodded. Ours. One word. Powerful enough to tear down centuries of division. Would you like me to continue translating the next scene, where Richard faces the backlash from his board and Margaret Whitman? The truth is, I fell in love with a woman who used to clean houses, but never bowed her head. A woman who raised two amazing daughters with no one by her side. A woman stronger than anyone in this room. Margaret leaned her elbows on the table, her voice turning to stone. Allow me to get to the point. The board is questioning your judgment. Falling for an employee is one thing, but declaring your intent to marry a single black woman from a lower class, that shows you're no longer fit to lead a billion-dollar corporation. Beneath me? Richard's voice dropped, every word like a blade slicing through her hypocrisy. You know what I mean. She has no pedigree. She didn't attend an Ivy League school. She doesn't have a family trust fund. And worse, she's not white enough. She went to Columbia, grew up in the Upper East Side. Her connections run deeper than most people in this room, including yours. Margaret froze. Clearly, she hadn't prepared for that fact. You didn't know, because you never considered her worth knowing. You saw a black mother mopping floors and immediately labeled her inferior. You didn't see a person. You saw a stereotype. Regardless, people will see her as some calculating black woman who brought two kids as bait. How else could someone like her break into the elite without trapping someone? If that's the case, then they're all shallow. And I have zero patience left to live by the opinions of the shallow. Margaret's face hardened, like a mask of morality cracking to reveal something uglier beneath. You should start caring, she said coldly. The board is considering a no-confidence vote. Marrying her, a black woman with no title, could end your career, Richard. Blood surged to Richard's face as if his heart had been squeezed. One vote would be enough to strip away everything he had built. Because he loved someone the board deemed the wrong color. You can't be that foolish, Margaret snapped. We bled and sweated to build this empire. You're going to throw it all away for some temporary fling with a woman outside our class? I won't sit back and watch you let emotions, and a woman who once held a mop, destroy what we've built for 15 years. Sarah is the only thing that's ever made my life meaningful beyond work, Richard replied, eyes burning. She's a distraction. You leave meetings early. You ignore strategic relationships. Since she came into your life, you're no longer the CEO I trusted. I choose family, not hollow social circles full of prejudice. She is nothing, and if you have any sense left, she will never set foot in your family tree. That skin, that background, it's a stain to investors. Richard stood, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Get out of my office, right now. Think hard, Richard. You're throwing away a lifetime of work just to prove you're not a traditional white CEO. 15 years for a woman of another class, another race, and whom you've known for barely 6 months? If it means protecting Sarah and the girls, I won't hesitate, Margaret scoffed. Then you don't deserve that chair. She rose, chin lifted as if delivering a verdict. The board meets Friday. I suggest you wake up before it's too late. As the door shut, Richard collapsed into his chair like a stone, eyes fixed on the horizon. What once was his dream, now a barrier between him and love. Everything he had sacrificed, everything he had built, now hung on an unfair scale. Reputation or heart, power or family. That night, Richard drove like a ghost, the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he alone to bear it. Sarah glanced at his pale face and tired eyes, then gently told the girls, "Go upstairs and do your homework. Mommy will come up later." "What's wrong?" she asked softly, placing her hand on his arm and guiding him to the wooden chair by the fireplace. Richard told her everything, from the whispered insults to the board's threats and the ugly confrontation with Margaret Whitman. Each word stabbed Sarah's soul, sharp, humiliating, and unjust. Her face gradually turned pale. "They think I'm a black gold digger," she whispered, her voice slicing through the air. "They don't understand you, Richard. They think you're under some spell, being manipulated, as if someone like me could never be worthy of someone like you." She turned to face him, eyes shimmering. "Maybe they're not entirely wrong." "What are you talking about?" He froze. "Maybe I am the mistake in your life. Maybe you're giving up too much for a black woman who will never be accepted by the elite." "Don't ever say that again. Don't let them take your worth away. You built an empire with blood and dreams. I can't be the one who brings it crashing down, just because my skin makes them uncomfortable. Sarah, without you and the girls, I don't want any empire. But you also know what this means. Years of effort, legacy, financial stability for the children. Everything's hanging by a thread. We don't need them. I have savings. I've lived with nothing before, and I survived. But can you really watch the company you love be buried and still smile? Will there be a day when you resent me for loving me, choosing me, and losing everything else?" He held her tightly, feeling her body tremble as if torn between love and guilt. "I could never resent you. I love you because you are the only truth in my life. I love you too, and because I love you, I can't just sit and watch you destroy your life for me, for someone the world refuses to accept. You're not a burden. You're the light in the dark room I've lived in for far too long." She was silent, her eyes retreating into the shadows. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper in the desert wind. "What if we wait? Wait until you can convince the powerful that a woman of color can be a CEO's wife." "Sarah, no, I won't play by their rules. Just wait until you figure out a way to show them the truth, or until you're ready to choose what truly matters most. You already know what matters. You, Rose, and Lily, our family, is my only priority." Sarah looked into his eyes. "Then choose us, even if it means losing everything, even if the price is brutal. But if it's love, choose me. Choose us." Richard held her like she was the last anchor he had, and he knew the real storm was still coming. The 7 days before the board meeting were 7 circles of hell for Richard. By day, he was a strategist, fighting every move to save both the company and his love. By night, he was a lonely man battling the fear that he might be destroying everything for a dream the world wouldn't allow. Sarah gradually withdrew, silent and distant, as though retreating into herself. Even as Richard tried to hold her hand in the dark, she still made breakfast, still took the girls to school, still waited for him each night. But her eyes weren't present. Each time she looked at him, it was like she was memorizing his face in case these were the final days. "Mom's sad," Lily said softly on Wednesday morning, while Richard was helping her with third-grade math. Her words made his hand stop mid-air with the pencil. "Why do you think that?" he asked, trying to keep his voice gentle. "She has the same face she had in the old apartment, when she wasn't sure where dinner was coming from. She's worried, like someone wants to take everything from us again." Rose, reading nearby, looked up. "Are you and Mom fighting?" Richard's heart clenched. "It's just grown-up stuff, sweetheart. No matter what, your mom loves you and Lily. She's not going anywhere." Lily tilted her head. "But you're not sure if you're marrying her, are you?" "I want to marry your mom more than anything. But sometimes grown-ups let money and skin color get in the way of love. Some people think I'm too good, and your mom's not enough." Rose, ever direct, asked, "Because someone thinks her dark skin and being poor matters more than her loving you for real?" "That's not what matters," Lily declared firmly. "We love you because you're kind. You make great pancakes and you listen to our ghost stories every night. Mom loves you because you have a warm smile and you don't make fun of the coconut oil in her hair. Not because of some company." Richard thought, if only the board could see life through the eyes of children, where love has no color or paycheck. On Thursday night, Richard knew exactly what he had to do, and he was no longer afraid. He found her in the kitchen, scrubbing a spotless dish over and over, her usual action when her mind was overwhelmed. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said. She turned, dishcloth still in hand, eyes tense. "I know. I was going to talk to you too." "I'm not giving you up," Richard said, cutting off fate itself. "They can take the title, the wealth, but they can't take away the woman I love. I'm going to marry you. We'll be a family, no matter how loud the world screams." Sarah's eyes shimmered. "Richard, you don't see what you're giving up." "I know exactly what I'm letting go of. A world full of power but no love, of fake applause but no real arms to hold me. I choose you because you're real. And if one day you regret it, if 5 years from now you look back and think, you should have chosen your career?" Richard stepped forward, taking her cold, wet hands, warm with love. "Sarah, 5 years from now, I'll be sitting in the audience cheering for Rose at graduation, holding Lily's hand as she enters art school. And I'll come home, not to a lavish penthouse, but to a place full of real love, where people love me for who I am, not for the logo on my business card." Richard knew what he was choosing, not a cold corporate empire, but a warm life, filled with the laughter of two beautiful brown girls, in the gaze of a woman the world tried to reject just for the color of her skin. "My real job has just begun," he thought, "not building empires, but protecting a family the world thinks doesn't belong beside me. This job is raising 2 kids to know they don't need white skin or a perfect pedigree to be worthy of love. It's waking up every day beside a woman who makes me want to be kind, not just a CEO." Sarah quietly leaned into him, her shoulders softening. "Are you sure?" she asked. Richard looked deep into her eyes that had endured years of scornful stares. "I've never been more certain of anything." The next morning, Richard adjusted his collar, fully aware that today might be the last time he entered the room where he had once been praised, and where they now waited to strip him of his position because he loved a black woman. He kissed Sarah and hugged Rose and Lily tightly, then stepped into the car, his heart not racing, but calm, unnervingly so. The room was silent, like a chamber awaiting execution. Margaret Whitman sat at the head of the table, her face as cold as wax. Richard took his usual seat, the one that used to symbolize power, and waited. "Richard," Margaret began, her voice flat, as if addressing an employee about to be terminated, "have you reconsidered your personal choices?" "I have, and I've decided that if this board cannot accept a woman simply because she's black, used to be a janitor and loves me, then maybe this isn't the company I want to lead anymore. Whispers erupted, like he just declared war on a religion. But Margaret didn't blink. So you choose her over the company you built yourself? Margaret's voice was thick with contempt, emphasizing her like it was filth. I choose love over fear. I choose a meaningful life, not one coated with bank accounts and hollow prestige. Another board member, Richard Tom, interjected, we could negotiate. What if you keep the relationship quiet? No marriage, no public exposure, just a discreet affair to keep the board comfortable. You mean I should keep her in the shadows like some private indulgence, as long as it doesn't embarrass the board? That's your solution? Richard's voice turned ice cold. That's not what I meant, Tom stammered. No, that's exactly what you meant. And it shows. You people have never understood what honor means, or love, especially when that love wears a skin tone you deem unworthy. Margaret leaned forward, her tone like a lecture. Richard, be rational. You can keep her as your private life. Successful white men like you don't need to bind yourselves publicly to a woman of color. It will tank the stock. The scrape of his chair echoed sharply as Richard stood. Enough. I'll say this once. Sarah Chin is the strongest woman I've ever known. Not because of Ivy League degrees or elite family ties, but because she survived mockery, endured racism, and raised two black girls in a world that devalues them. She's not a prop for charity galas, not a token minority to polish my image. She is the woman I love, and in 2 weeks I will marry her, regardless of whether you think she's worthy of appearing on a rich man's wedding invitation. The room went dead silent, as if he'd shattered some sacred taboo. Richard scanned the faces that once made him tremble. They now looked like a pack of cowards, afraid of a woman who had dared to love beyond her station. He continued, his voice calm and sharp as a blade. If this company forces me to choose between its reputation and the woman who makes me a better man, then I am clearly in the wrong place. I resign, effective immediately. Uproar followed, but Richard raised his hand, and the noise melted into silence. I'll also sell my controlling shares. Margaret, you crave power. Maybe it's time you owned all of it. Let's see if you can steer this company as well as you impose your prejudice. Richard, don't be rash, Margaret said, though her eyes gleamed like a predator who'd finally cornered its prey. She had waited for this moment. I'm not being rash. I'm liberating myself. He gathered his papers without blinking. My lawyer will send the terms. Enjoy your throne, soulless as it now is. As he turned to leave, Tom shouted, You're walking away from everything, Richard. Your career, your legacy, your life's work. He turned back, eyes steady, voice low. No, Tom. I'm stepping into the life I once dreamed of, but was too scared to reach for. And for the first time, I'm not afraid. He left without looking back. The car drove him through the city, not as an escape, but as a return to something real. When the car pulled up to the wooden house, his phone vibrated nonstop, news spreading like wildfire. But Richard didn't care. He had chosen what mattered most. Sarah ran to the door, her face pale with fear. The news said, You resigned. Is it true, Richard? It is, he replied. But in his eyes, there was no regret, only peace. No, I didn't do it just for you, Richard whispered, pulling Sarah close in the little kitchen, where she once washed dishes by hand because they couldn't afford a dishwasher. I did it for us, for two beautiful black children sitting right there, for the woman who worked twice as hard just to be seen as good enough in a world that never played fair. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. But the company, Richard, you spent your whole life building it. My life's real work, Richard said, is loving you and raising Rose and Lily to know that their skin is not a limitation. The living room door creaked open. Rose and Lily peeked out, their eyes sharp and hesitant, like children already taught to be wary of strangers' stares. So, does that mean you're not rich anymore, Dad? Lily asked softly, her fingers curling around her sleeve, echoing the playground jeers. Poor little black girl. Richard smiled gently. I'm still rich, not in Wall Street stocks, but because I have you two, Though, I did technically own a bit more this morning. Rose hesitated. Does Mom still want to marry you, now that you're not a CEO? Richard looked at Sarah, heart pounding. Sarah smiled through tears. Even if you were broke, living in a cardboard box, I'd still choose you, Richard. Even if the whole world turned its back. Richard chuckled. Well, maybe not quite that bad. I've safeguarded enough not to end up on the sidewalk. Sarah asked softly, almost in a whisper. Are you sure? About all this? About giving up the world of the wealthy? For us? Richard looked around the small wooden house. No vaulted ceilings, no Italian fireplace. But it was warm. It was alive. It was real. Library books stacked on the table. Lily's half-finished drawings. Sarah's scratched glasses. None of it belonged to the glittering world he once lived in. But this was his world now. The giggles, the pitter-patter of small feet. It was a symphony of what money could never buy. A real family. 6 months ago, I had everything, and none of it meant anything. Now I have everything worth living for. How could I regret that? Sarah sighed. You've sacrificed so much. I'm just afraid that one day you'll look back and regret it. I used to think safety meant a 7-figure bank account, Richard said. But then I realized you and the girls are the only security I ever needed. I tried to prove my worth by making money, building an empire. But in the end, what makes me worthy is that an incredible black woman loves me, and 2 little black girls call me Dad. Richard held her hand, his eyes sincere. I have value because you chose me, and the girls chose me. There is no greater honor. Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck. I love you. I love you too. All of you. Group hug, Lily shouted. And like magic, the entire family closed in around him. A man who once sat atop the financial world, now the richest man on earth, in the arms of the 3 women he loved most. That evening, as the family sat together planning the wedding, in the cluttered little kitchen, amid Lily's laughter and scribbled drawings, the phone rang. It was Margaret Whitman, her voice still cold, once the embodiment of everything Richard had defined as success. Richard, Margaret said, I've thought about today. The board has reassessed the situation. They want you back, with full authority, no restrictions. You can marry whoever you want, even that black woman. We won't interfere. Just come back as CEO. Richard looked up at Sarah, bent over helping Rose with a cardboard model. Lily was coloring, beaming despite coloring outside the lines and proudly declaring, It's still beautiful, Mommy. This was the real world, not 7-figure payrolls or shareholder dinners, but the smell of crayons, the laughter of his black daughters, and the warm gaze of a woman's society once dismissed. This was victory. Thank you, Margaret, Richard said, but I'm no longer interested in returning to a place that values skin color more than character. I've found something better than being CEO of a board full of people wearing glasses, but blind to the truth. Margaret scoffed lightly. I don't believe there's anything better than running a multi-billion-dollar empire. Richard replied, being the husband of a woman you once called beneath me, being the father of 2 black girls I'd protect with everything I have. Then he hung up. 2 hours later, in the soft yellow glow of the wooden house, Richard was reading a fairy tale when Rose, the little girl with honey-brown skin, whispered, Dad. She hadn't used the word before. It had never belonged to anyone, but now it belonged to Richard. He smiled, gently brushed her hair. That's right, I'm so happy that your mom and you girls chose me. Her answer was a nod and a grateful look. And you chose us every day. It wasn't just a touching line, it was a vow, deeper than any signature he'd ever placed on a billion-dollar contract. 6 months later, beneath the golden sun of a new day, Richard stood in the garden of the estate, once cold, now vibrant with laughter, as they prepared the wedding arch. White chairs aligned neatly, pink ribbons tied in bows. All eyes would turn toward a canopy of lilacs and peonies, just like Sarah's gentleness, the woman once deemed not his class. The mansion, once a symbol of power, had become a true home. Every hallway echoed with the giggles and songs of the two girls who'd forever changed Richard's heart. Tom, still his best friend, despite his past objections, approached quietly and asked, "Nervous?" Though he had once told Richard he was throwing away his future for a black cleaning lady, Tom had come to understand. Today he was the best man. Richard smiled, adjusted his tie. "Not nervous, excited. Really?" Tom whispered, "I owe you an apology." Richard looked at him. "What changed your mind, Tom?" "I was wrong. Wrong to think race was the issue. Wrong to think love comes second to a paycheck." "What made you realize that?" Richard asked, tilting his head. Tom smiled gently. "Meeting Sarah, meeting the girls, seeing how they look at you, I understood why you chose them over a billion-dollar empire." Richard looked up and corrected him. "I didn't choose family over the company. I chose love over living in fear of what people would think about a white man marrying a black woman. And it was the best decision of my life." Life after leaving behind the powerful CEO title turned out to be more radiant than any cold corporate dream Richard had ever had. He started a private consulting firm, no suits, no judgment from all white boards, and finally spent time on what mattered, cheering at Lily's play, chanting Rose's name at her soccer match, holding up signs for the girls at the school art fair. Past investments were still yielding returns, enough to ensure that even though Sarah had once been deemed unworthy of entering the upper class, she was now building a legacy for her daughter and for Richard's entire lineage. But the most precious thing was that every morning, Richard woke not to emails from executives, but to the whispered "Good morning, Dad" from two little girls once called stepchildren of high society. Those who truly loved them were present, including Helen, the volunteer chef and logistics queen for the wedding, who had once said, "They are a light in a society full of prejudice." Richard sat before the simple white arch, looking out at the seats filled not with shareholders, but with familiar faces, people who understood what it meant to fight for love. Mrs. Rodriguez, who once scrubbed floors alongside Sarah, sat in the front row, tears streaming down her cheeks, for she knew some weddings aren't just about love, but about restoring dignity to those pushed to the margins because of their skin color. Old friends, not all of whom had agreed with Richard's choices at first, had come quietly, but their eyes said everything. They now understood. Sarah's former colleagues, once thought to be only fit for cleaning rooms, were now true friends. But no one was more important than the two girls standing beside the arch. Rose and Lily, two brown-skinned angels in lavender dresses, each step a statement that love has no color. As the music began, Richard nearly forgot to breathe. For at the end of the flower path stood Sarah, in a simple white dress, each step a declaration of unshakable love. No one remembered the article that once called her too common for the business elite. Now she walked like a goddess, sunlight glowing on her smooth caramel skin and flowing black hair. But it was her smile, not fearful, not hesitant, that made Richard's heart race. The smile of a black woman who knew that today she had nothing left to prove to the world. As she came closer, Richard thought of that first night, the cold room, the two girls scrubbing floors with bare hands, and the 6-month journey of turning prejudice into strength. Every scornful glance, every "she's not in your league," it all led to this moment where he was marrying the woman the world said he shouldn't. And every bias they overcame, every time they chose love over silence, had built this sacred moment. "Hi," Sarah whispered, her eyes shimmering, not from sadness, but because for the first time in her life, she felt truly loved and free. "Hi," Richard replied, his hand tightening around hers like a vow never to let go. Their vows weren't elaborate, just two people from worlds once forbidden to mix, now promising to build a family no one had the right to deny. A family with love, with tears, and with triumph. Richard looked at Sarah and began, his voice lowering in the stillness. 6 months ago, I thought I had everything. Titles, power, rooms full of white men shaking hands as if they ruled the world. I used to believe success meant having the biggest chair, being called Mr. Strategy by the financial world, never having to apologize for being richer than others. But then I met you, Sarah, a woman whom society still believes is unfit to walk the red carpet with a CEO. And I realized every metric I used before was wrong. You taught me that real success isn't in wallets or bank accounts. It's in children's laughter around a breakfast table, paint stains on sleeves, and handmade cards that say, "Happy Father's Day" on the fridge. You showed me that love isn't something we wedge between two meetings. It's what makes us cancel the schedule and finally start living. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears, but her eyes still glowed as Richard continued. He vowed with utmost seriousness that his love wouldn't just exist on good days, but especially in the storms. He promised to be the father Rose and Lily, two children once labeled racially ambiguous, deserved to have, and the husband Sarah never believed society would allow her to have. "I will choose this family every day," he whispered, "no matter the judgmental glances, the whispers behind doors, or the loaded questions like, 'Why would someone like you choose someone like her?'" When it was Sarah's turn, her voice rang out without a tremble, as if each word was a declaration of war against prejudice. "Richard," she said, eyes fixed on him, "when I first met you, I was scared. I was afraid to trust my heart, because that heart had once been fooled by empty promises. I'd been hurt. I'd heard 'I love you' from someone who walked away the moment he found out I was a single mother with brown skin. You showed me that love isn't in expensive bouquets or dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. It's in a man getting down on his knees to scrub the floor with two little girls who don't share his blood. Real love is when, every morning, that person still chooses to stay, even when the world outside says we don't belong together. It's when two people build something beautiful, even if others say it's wrong just because our skin tones don't match." She paused, glancing at her daughters holding hands, eyes of children who knew too well what it meant to be judged simply because their stepfather was white. "You didn't just love me. You loved them too. And they love you in the way only children can love someone who truly cares for their mother. You weren't obligated to care for them. You chose to, voluntarily. And that's what made you someone I could trust. It's the kind of love I thought only existed in books. But today I stand here because I know it was worth waiting for, fighting for, and believing in." As her vow echoed through the air, Richard leaned down and kissed Sarah. A kiss filled with gratitude, love, and a silent vow that he would never let society define their love again. The crowd erupted in applause, but no one was happier than Rose and Lily. They jumped with joy as if they'd waited their whole lives for this day, the day their mother's love was finally recognized. "We're a real family now," Lily shouted, unable to contain her joy, as if yelling it in the faces of those who once claimed they weren't blood. Rose smiled and gently corrected her, like the wise little 9-year-old she was. "We've always been a family. Now no one can deny it." The wedding party took place on the rooftop, where string lights glowed softly above joyful dances. Helen and Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared the feast with love, as if to say, "We support this marriage." Richard looked around at the laughter, the dancing, and wondered, why had he ever been afraid? He had never seen Sarah and the girls so radiant. "Dad," Rose tugged his sleeve as he twirled with her mother, calling him by the words she used to hesitate saying in front of others. "Can I ask you something?" Richard turned, his voice barely steady under the golden balcony lights. "Of course, my love," Sarah answered, smiling. The smile that made him forget the world once called her too dark to be loved by a CEO. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Truly happy? Not the kind you put on for the cameras, but the kind that comes from the deepest place in your heart." Richard looked around. Sarah was spinning with Lily, her black hair shimmering under the string lights. Mrs. Rodriguez was teaching Latin dance to a group of white guests who looked awkward but amused. Tom and Helen were passionately discussing the secret to African fruitcake, something they never cared to hear about years ago, thinking food from people of color is usually too sweet and heavy. This was his new life, a beautiful mess of love, where brown children's laughter echoed in crowds that once had only white faces. This family, not perfect by any standard, was perfect to him. "Rose," he called, holding out his hand for her to dance. "I never thought I'd be this happy, especially when I used to believe that loving a woman of color was impossible in my world. That night, after all the guests had left and the girls were asleep, Richard and Sarah stood on the bedroom balcony, looking out over the estate, a place once symbolizing white affluence, now a true home to a family whose skin color once sparked hushed whispers. "Do you regret anything?" Sarah asked, resting her head on his chest, where his heart beat for something beyond love. "Peace." "Only one thing," Richard said softly, tightening his arm around her. Sarah raised an eyebrow, slightly worried. "What is it?" "I regret spending so many years lost in a world where skin color defined worth, instead of seeing you and loving you sooner." Sarah smiled, a smile carrying the trust earned through silent battles with bias, and kissed his cheek. "We met at the right time," she whispered. "Any earlier, and you might have still believed your advisor who said loving a single black mom would ruin your reputation. Any later, and maybe I wouldn't have believed in love anymore." "Do you think we'll be happy?" he asked. "Lasting happiness, not the movie kind, but the real kind." "I think we'll be real," Sarah replied, her gaze quiet but steady. "There will be days when people look at me, then at you, and whisper. Days when Rose and Lily ask why their friends aren't allowed to come over. But there will also be days we hold hands through it all. And that realness, that true love, is more precious than any perfect happiness." As they got ready for bed, the bed that now belonged to them both in every sense, Richard found himself thinking his life had taken a new direction, and for the first time, he was proud to have gone against the advice, the rules, and even his family's expectations. He had once sat at the helm of a billion-dollar company. Now he sat on the floor, helping his daughter glue paper to a volcano model. And he had never felt so wealthy. He had given up power to gain something greater, the power to ensure his loved ones never doubted they were loved and protected. He traded tense boardroom meetings for giggles at the dinner table, budget projections for Rose singing off-key in the school choir, and he had no regrets. As the lights went out, Sarah turned to him. "Richard, thank you for seeing me, for not looking past me like they used to, for seeing my daughters, for choosing the hard thing, loving a family the world told you to avoid." Richard gently squeezed her hand. "Sarah, if someone asks what my greatest achievement in life is, I won't say an IPO or stock portfolio. I'll say it's loving you and hearing your daughters call me dad."